Imagine a killer walking the streets of Florida calling himself Wade Wilson, just like the Marvel character Deadpool. But this isn't a movie, and this Wade Wilson isn't a hero. In 2019, he left a trail of terror by brutally murdering two women, Diane Ruiz and Christine Melton. This is the true story of how an obsession with a comic book character turned into real-life horror. Stay with us as we uncover the dark, twisted mind of the man behind the mask, and the chilling murders that shocked an entire community. Before we dive deeper into this chilling case, we just want to remind you, if you're into gripping true crime stories, mysterious unsolved cases, and dark tales from the real world, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our latest videos as we continue to uncover the most spine-tingling stories out there. Now let's get back to the case. Wade Wilson wasn't always a name that sparked fear. Born in 1991 in Florida, he grew up like many others, yet there was something off about him from an early age. Wade's childhood was marked by instability and violence. Raised in a broken home, he bounced between family members, never quite finding a place where he belonged. His mother struggled with substance abuse, and his father was often absent. This chaotic upbringing shaped the troubled man Wade would become. As a teenager, Wade began showing signs of aggression and emotional detachment. He had frequent run-ins with the law for petty crimes, shoplifting, vandalism, and later, more violent offenses. His anger seemed to have no outlet, and over time, it started to fester. Wade had trouble holding down a job, maintaining relationships, and fitting into society. He was a misfit, with a growing hatred for the world around him. One of the few things Wade enjoyed was immersing himself in comic books. Among his favorites was Deadpool, the Marvel anti-hero known for his dark humor and violent nature. Wade found himself drawn to the character's sense of rebellion. Deadpool didn't follow the rules, and neither did Wade. But instead of fighting fictional villains, Wade was fighting his own demon. His obsession with the character grew, and he began to adopt Deadpool's personality, referring to himself by the same name. In his twisted mind, he felt empowered by the idea of becoming a real-life version of this unhinged anti-hero. But the truth was much darker. Wade Wilson wasn't a misunderstood anti-hero. He was a ticking time bomb. His life continued to spiral, with his mental state deteriorating rapidly. In 2019, Wade reached a breaking point. His obsession with Deadpool and violent fantasies merged with reality. Wade became consumed by anger, convinced that the world owed him something, and his growing instability turned deadly. Wade had met Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz in different circumstances, but the outcome was the same for both women: brutal murder. These women were not just victims of his rage, they became targets for a man who saw himself above consequences. Wade's crimes weren't just about taking lives, they were about power, control, and unleashing his inner darkness. In 2019, Wade Wilson's life took a dark and terrifying turn. After years of living on the fringes of society, his obsession with the Deadpool character morphed into something far more sinister. Wade's life was spiraling out of control and his violent tendencies were reaching a boiling point. That summer, he made the horrifying decision to act on his darkest impulses, targeting two innocent women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. Christine Melton was a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. At 27, she was a friendly face at her local Publix, always ready to help others with a smile. Christine was known for her warmth and kindness, qualities that made her a beloved figure in her community. But in May 2019, her life took a tragic turn when she crossed paths with Wade Wilson. Wade and Christine met through mutual acquaintances. On the surface, their interactions seemed normal. Wade, who was struggling to keep his life together, found an opportunity to approach Christine under the guise of friendship. He was charming and persuasive, gaining her trust. But beneath his polite exterior lay a deeply disturbed individual, his mind twisted by fantasies and anger. One evening, Wade convinced Christine to join him for what he promised would be a casual outing. She agreed, unaware of the horror that awaited her. They drove to a secluded apartment complex on the outskirts of Fort Myers. It was a place that seemed ordinary. For Christine, it would become the site of unimaginable terror. Inside the apartment, Wade's demeanor changed abruptly. What began as a seemingly harmless get-together quickly escalated into a brutal assault. Christine fought back valiantly, but Wade's rage overpowered her. He attacked her with a violent force that left her helpless. By the time it was over, Christine's body lay lifeless in that grim setting, a victim of Wade's uncontrollable anger. Just days after Christine's murder, Wade struck again. Diane Ruiz, a 34-year-old woman who worked at a local store, was enjoying a typical day until she crossed paths with Wade. Diane was a hardworking and caring person, known for her kindness and dedication. Like Christine, she had no idea she was about to meet her end. Diane's routine took a fateful turn when she was approached by Wade. He had been watching her for some time, planning his next attack. Wade lured Diane with a false pretense, convincing her to accompany him to a nearby area. Diane, trusting and unsuspecting, agreed. They traveled to a wooded area on the outskirts of town. It was a quiet place, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and passersby. As they arrived, Wade's intentions became horrifyingly clear. He overpowered Diane with brutal force, her pleas for help lost in the desolate surroundings. Diane's final moments were marked by sheer terror. Wade showed no mercy as he carried out his gruesome act. Her body was later discovered in that remote area, a chilling reminder of the violence that lurked beneath Wade's facade. The community was left reeling from the brutality of the crime, struggling to comprehend the senseless loss. Christine Melton's and Diane Ruiz's disappearances quickly raised alarms in the community. Both women were beloved figures in their neighborhoods, and their sudden absences did not go unnoticed. The local police launched a thorough investigation, initially following up on missing persons reports and potential leads. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered evidence linking Wade Wilson to both murders. Forensic experts found DNA at the crime scenes that matched Wade's, and witnesses reported seeing him in the vicinity of the locations where the women were last seen. Surveillance footage from nearby areas also captured Wade's vehicle, further cementing his involvement. At first, Wade tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but the mounting evidence against him made it clear that his world was unraveling. As the police closed in, Wade's once composed exterior began to crack. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and he made several attempts to evade capture, but the law was closing in. Wade Wilson's arrest was the culmination of weeks of intense investigation. On a humid afternoon in late June, law enforcement officers, armed with a warrant, raided Wade's apartment. The scene was chaotic as officers stormed in, and Wade, realizing his time was up, was found trying to hide evidence. As they entered his apartment, they discovered a disturbing array of items: Deadpool memorabilia, bloody clothing, and disturbing notes that hinted at his twisted fantasies. Wade was apprehended without resistance, his face a mask of resignation and defiance. He was taken into custody and transported to the county jail. The arrest was met with a mix of relief and dread. While the community was glad that the perpetrator was off the streets, they were also haunted by the realization of what had transpired. For many, the arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful journey towards justice for Christine and Diane. The trial of Wade Wilson began several months after his arrest, drawing significant media attention. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members of the victims, and curious onlookers. The trial would become a public spectacle, revealing the gruesome details of Wade's crimes and the psychological profile of the man behind them. Prosecutors painted a stark picture of Wade's actions, presenting the evidence gathered during the investigation. They described the brutal manner in which Christine and Diane were murdered, emphasizing the premeditation and cruelty of Wade's actions. Prosecution argued that Wade's obsession with the Deadpool character had warped his sense of reality, leading him to commit these heinous acts. Wade's defense team, on the other hand, tried to argue that his actions were the result of severe mental illness. They painted a picture of a man who was deeply troubled and unable to distinguish right from wrong. They brought in mental health experts who testified about Wade's unstable psychological state, suggesting that his condition had played a significant role in his criminal behavior. Throughout the trial, Wade's demeanor was cold and detached. He showed little emotion, as the details of his crimes were laid bare. The courtroom was filled with tension, as witnesses described the impact of the murders on the victims' families. The emotional testimony from Christine's and Diane's loved ones highlighted the devastating effects of Wade's actions. After weeks of testimony and legal arguments, the jury began their deliberations. The evidence against Wade Wilson was overwhelming, and it took the jury only a few hours to reach a verdict. Wade was found guilty on all charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with a mixture of relief and sadness. Christine's and Diane's families, it was a bittersweet moment. While justice had been served, pain of their loss remained. The sentencing phase followed, where both sides presented their final arguments. The prosecution argued for the maximum sentence, emphasizing the brutality and premeditation of the murder. Wade's defense team continued to push for a lighter sentence, citing his mental health issues. Despite their efforts, the judge sentenced Wade Wilson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's decision was a clear message. The severity of Wade's crimes demanded the harshest possible punishment. As Wade Wilson began serving his life sentence, the reality of his situation set in. Behind bars, Wade's life was a far cry from the infamy he once sought. His days were spent in a maximum security prison, a stark contrast to the freedom he had once taken for granted. Prison life was marked by isolation and the constant reminder of his actions. Wade was placed in solitary confinement to protect him from other inmates, a measure that mirrored the isolation he had imposed on his victims. His existence became a routine of confinement and reflection, far removed from the violent fantasies that had once consumed him. Despite the physical barriers of prison, Wade's legacy continued to haunt the community. The stories of Christine and Diane lived on, and their families remained committed to keeping their memories alive. Wade's actions had left a scar that would not easily heal, and the community's efforts to remember and honor the victims were a testament to their enduring impact. Despite the dark legacy left by Wade Wilson, the lives of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz continue to be remembered for the light they brought into the world. Their stories have inspired those who knew them, and those who have heard about them, to strive for kindness, understanding, and justice. Efforts to honor their memories include community events, charity work, and advocacy for causes that reflect their values. Christine's and Diane's families have worked tirelessly to ensure that their legacies are remembered for the good they did, rather than the tragedy of their deaths. Their stories serve as a powerful reminder of the impact that one individual's actions can have on a community. While Wade's legacy is one of darkness and horror, the legacy of Christine and Diane is one of enduring love, compassion, and the strength to overcome the shadows cast by their tragic end. Thank you for watching True Crime Uneviled. This case is a tragic example of how real life can be darker than fiction. If you're drawn to more chilling true crime stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We dive deep into the darkest corners of humanity to bring you the stories you won't forget. Stay safe, stay aware, and until next time, keep your eyes open.